Welcome back to another episode of Recorrelated Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Natalie Baker. And today we are back with the topic of elevating your cybersecurity leadership impact with soft skills. We have Anthony Hernandez here. I'm going to turn it over to him and let him kind of introduce himself a little bit and talk about how he found his way into cyber.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. You're the best host there is. Um, let's see. Well, I am an associate security engineer at Acqui at the moment. I'm still very much a junior. I only really started officially in cyber as of December. But with that being said, I've been a red teamer and a hacker since I was a teenager. So it was a natural progression for me to finally, work in the field, like for real, and actually make money off of it.
How to, bring it into a legitimate area, right? Like make money legitimately off your skill set. Yeah, that makes sense.
And not just, playing around with like machines because I could.
I mean, sometimes that's the best learning, right? Like it's how you learn best.
You know it.
All right. So we're going to be talking about soft skills. And I know you said you're more of a junior, but people, if you've watched the first episode, you know how I feel about it. The minute somebody in your company looks up to you, you are now welcomed into leadership. You are considered a leader because people are looking up to you. People are looking to you to set the example for what they need to do and how to build their careers, and how to be successful in their career field. So knowing and taking that leap now, even though you might not be in a leadership position yet, you've filled previous leadership positions. Oh my goodness, today is not the day for me.
I it's been a long day.
I drank an energy drink this morning, so I'm blaming that because my mouth is not moving as fast as my thoughts are.
Oh, you are all good. You're in good company. No worries.
But
Awesome.
anyway, so where do you want to what are your hot takes on soft skills that you feel are really important?
Sure. I mean, so one thing that really kind of stuck out to me when I got into cyber, like officially, was the fact that I saw so many other students and people who were in the same kind of boat as me who are so focused on certificates and education and stuff like that. But it's like literally everyone in the industry has those certificates and the education. Like it's a very talented, large pool of people who honestly, there are way more talented people in the industry than myself. But really the thing that sets people apart in cyber, in my opinion, has been the soft skills. It's the people who can talk about things, who can relate to others, who the communication skills paramount. Really, that's the real thing there. um
Yeah.
and the social aspect too. Everyone in cyber is so educated and smart, like I mentioned before, but do you have like the people skills? Are you able to connect with people and get them to like you, really?
Yeah, and do you have the emotional intelligence to kind of know how to interact with other people? And emotional intelligence is like it's hard. It's not hard to learn, but apparently that's because I just naturally was inclined with it. Like some people have it, it's more of like a natural inclination for some people, and others they really have to work to build it. So for me, it wasn't necessarily hard, but for others, it definitely could be hard. And there are aspects that I still struggle with on the daily, like understanding like social cues sometimes for me is a little bit more difficult. And I'm like, well, that person doesn't like me because I didn't their tone of voice wasn't really what I was looking at. And sometimes I'll overanalyze things. So like getting yourself to being, introspective as well. I think that's another good soft skill to build, but having that introspective or introspection in order to, but not being over analytical with it. Cause like, yeah, if you're an overthinker, you'll just overanalyze it all the way through. Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, me 2 months later, I'm still like, remember that conversation I had 2 months ago? Probably should have phrased this a little differently back then. And then then it's
um
just a rabbit hole.
and I think a really important kind of concept here is, and I learned this because I worked for a long time, like 8 years. I worked for a pretty well known like grocery grocery store. But like one of like the major kind of tenets of like their like kind of leadership is like learning to expect, excuse me, to kind of assume positive intention in people. Like most of the time, most people don't have a negative intention. Most of the time, they're just trying to live their lives and, just get by, really. Most of them don't have a personal vendetta for you. So for me, I say when I have those kinds of insecure moments, I'm like, I just got to let it go and just, assume positive intent here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I try to tell myself that, but, like, sometimes that doesn't really sometimes it is that other way, and you're like, "Oh,
True.
boy." I've been telling myself not to overthink this, but I probably should have been overthinking it the whole time.
I feel like there's a time and a place to overthink. Like overthinking can be your savior. Like it's not a bad thing per se.
It's not, it's just, sometimes it can be very annoying, especially in social situations, right? Like, when you're, like,
Mhm.
talking to somebody and then, an hour later, you're like, "Ooh, I said something stupid an hour ago, and, like, nobody called me on it, but I probably should have called myself out on it. Natalie, don't do that again." And it's just like, it's yeah. We could make a whole episode on overanalyzing things, but
Yeah.
I guess it does lead into the conversation of like being over analytical. Like sometimes the most important thing that you can do as a leader is being able to make decisions and being able to live with those decisions after they've been made, right?
Mhm.
So I had when I was in the military, I had a really great NCO who like taught me a lot of he took me under his wing and taught me like basically everything I know about leadership. So the reason I know I'm an okay leader is because he taught me.
Oh,
And
that's
I've tried
great.
to implement it. But one of the things that he's always where was I going with that? Oh man, this happens all the time too. This is always annoying. We'll come
I know
back
the
to it.
feeling.
Yeah.
I've had some really great mentors too who have just taught me so many great soft skills over the years, especially the one of the major things that a really close dear person to me once kind of told me is like back when we go back to sort of like the grocery store sort of thing. She would remind me, like the doors close at 10, they'll be open again at 8. Move it forward. Just keep the machine moving. Like, and I sort of just remember that. And that's why I'm just like, just keep moving forward. It's fine. Like, even if I said something stupid an hour ago, whatever, like I'll survive. And if someone actually was upset by something else said, of course I'll take accountability for it. You know, but you just have to
Yeah.
move forward with your life.
Oh, being decisive. Thanks. You brought me back to my topic was see, I knew it would come back. I knew it what it always does like 2 minutes later. Okay. So like what he would always tell me is what sets a leader apart from a boss is that a leader isn't afraid to make decisions and be wrong from time to time,
Yeah.
and but knowing that in the moment when you have that decision, you have limited knowledge of everything that's at play with that one decision that you're making, but making the best decision that you can make with the facts that you have available to you at that time or the information that you have available and being able to live with being wrong and it being okay that like hey if it didn't work out the way you planned for it you live you learn and you keep moving it along, right? Like so
Hmm.
it's also about being able to make a decision and not being afraid of being wrong in that decision. And I will say some companies in this field do better at making that a little bit less daunting than others. I think our company does probably the best job at it, like it being okay to make a mistake, but like trying to keep it minimal still.
Yeah. I mean, that being said, literally everybody makes mistakes all the time. But, can you pick yourself up afterwards? Can you keep it, again, moving forward? Can you keep the machine moving? Like, even if you make a mistake, if you fall on your face, get back up and keep going. You got work to do, unfortunately. In this
Yeah.
economy,
I always tell Luna, which is my dog, I always tell Luna,
oh,
I'm
I remember.
like, the bills don't pay themselves.
I love that that's what you tell your dog.
Well, and I also tell her because like sometimes she'll get sassy with me because she wants to go outside and I don't like I have meetings, sis. Like, no. And she'll be like getting sassy with me and barking at me, and I'm like, Luna, somebody has to pay for that yard that I just bought you. So
Totally. I feel like in the mornings with my pup, I'm always telling her, like, girl, I got a meeting. We got to keep it moving. Like we got
right.
15 minutes. Come on, get your sniffs in. We got
Yeah.
places to go.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, hurry up. Focus.
But
But
going back to the
anyway,
conversation about, like, making mistakes and stuff like that, it's like I said, everyone makes mistakes. You gotta be able to make the mistakes and live with them, and furthermore, as a leader, it's so important to allow people that work with you or, you could say for you or whatever, you gotta let them make mistakes too. Like, that's how people learn,
yeah. Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And you have to, especially if you have juniors on your team, you have to be able to create a safe space so that they can make those mistakes and learn from them,
Mhm.
without it impacting what they're delivering at the same time.
Ain't that the truth?
So, like, and some leaders do better at doing that than others, but like, even when I was in security operations and running that team, and I had a lot of juniors there too, I would always check every report before it went out to a client, for simple things. And we would use those moments, and we would have like learning lessons learned of like, okay, this is what you did, and for future, this is how we can kind of tweak it, make it a little bit better for you. So as a leader, it's also your job to open up that. And I think that by having the emotional intelligence, it really does feed into knowing that, like, hey, I know I just talked to this person, especially when I started training remotely. I would talk to somebody and I trained them on a task, and I could tell when somebody got lost on a concept I was trying to teach them. And because they would just be like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And one of the most like helpful ways of kind of going through that and figuring out what it is that they understood so that we're not wasting time going over something they already understand, and would be to ask them, okay, can you rephrase what I just said to you in a different way?
Like, show me you comprehend this.
In your own words, tell me what I just told you. Because if they
Mhm.
can do that and they can put it in their own words, then you know that they're ahhing you because they're taking it in, it's actually sinking into their brain and they're absorbing it, versus the aha of like, oh, my eyes just glazed over. I
It checks
lost
out.
something you said 10 seconds ago, like 10 minutes ago. I was checked out. So
Yeah.
like being able to create those types of things and having that emotional intelligence to be able to say, okay, this person might not actually be grasping what I'm putting on the table. So, like, how can we kind of break that down for them? That's a very, very key thing to do, especially when you have juniors, and everybody has juniors when you're in leadership. So, welcome.
Right, and I think it's so important to foster that kind of environment, like you mentioned before, about where they feel comfortable enough to tell you, like, "Hey, I don't really understand this very well. Like, do you think that you could show me a little bit more? Could I get a little bit more, like, basically hand-holding on this?" And, like, I feel like as a leader, they can't be afraid of you to say that. Like, they need to be able to come forward with those things, and if they can't, you got a bigger problem.
Yeah. Well, and if they can't or they're not, then you need to start asking yourself, what am I doing wrong as a leader to where they're not comfortable coming to me? Because that's a lot of it's like I said before, a lot of it's going to be introspection of like, what can I always look at it as, what am I doing wrong as a leader that makes this person think that they can't come to me and ask me these questions, or that I'm going to, be rude to them? Did I snap at them one time in the heat of a moment that I need to go back and apologize for, which is very, very, very rare. I think it's happened like once. But, was I maybe a little short with them and they kind of just like are now afraid of me a little bit? Or is it more so sometimes it just comes from like how you were brought up and how you were raised too? Like your culture has a lot
This
to
is
do with
true.
it. Because some cultures are like, we don't question authority. Authority tells us what to do and we do it, we follow through. Like that's not how some cultures are. And then
Sure.
when they come into the corporate world, they're now looking at managers as their authority figure. And you're like, well, no, you need to tell me. We need to talk. We need to work together. We need to collaborate so that you understand, because it does me no good if you don't understand it in 2 months.
Right. Like, that will, like, help me help you a little bit.
Yeah. 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 And so, but having that introspection, I think, is also a really key topic of a soft skill that a lot of leaders, I don't see a lot of leaders having it.
Mhm.
Um, in the mass majority of the field, most leaders are. I have seen a lot of leaders that were like, "Oh, well, you did this wrong and you did that wrong," and I've been in those organizations where it was just like a finger pointing exercise the whole time and nothing ever got solved because your job as a leader is to solve problems, right?
Right.
Is that not part of your job as a leader is to solve the problem? So like when people stop bringing their problems to you is the day that you need to start worrying.
Seriously, that's a clear indicator of a very serious issue.
But a lot of times I think that leaders like lose sight of the fact that like it's if you run your company or your department like in a way where people are afraid to come to you, they're not going to. And that's a soft skill. That's it. That's honestly emotional intelligence right there is being able to look at yourself and say, what can I do as a leader to make this person more successful than they are right now?
Right, because I mean, we're all on the same team, you know? It's like we're drinking from the same cup essentially. Like if one of us, if one of us is failing, then we're all failing, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And it actually as it I kinda go a little bit overboard, I think, sometimes. I've been told anyway, that, like, I will take the blame before anybody on my team ever takes the blame for anything. Like, I will be like, "Nope, that's my failure, not yours. That's my failure." Even
Mhm.
it even if it was, like, completely something that they just didn't do right or whatever the case is, as their leader, I should have had something in place to make sure that they weren't set up for failure. And if they failed, I didn't do my job right, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I can relate to that so much because I think of it the same way. Like, when I worked in leadership, if someone, let's say, has like a really serious problem, if there's like a serious kind of like issue that needs like some kind of corrective counseling or something like that, or a write up, it's like, well, I should have trained them better. Like, I should have made sure that they understood this a little bit better, like the policy. Like, it's a failure on my part. And I think a lot of leaders struggle with actually kind of looking at it that way of like, well, I share responsibility here. It's not all on just this one person.
Shared responsibility model, man.
Mm.
There's shared liability because that's how I taught myself shared responsibility in like 10 minutes. But there's shared liability on both sides. So like it can't just be like, oh, well, you did this, this, and this wrong.
Oh, the blame game.
Yeah, the minute you get into the blame game, and that's why it's easier because the minute you do that, anybody who works with you, for you, anything, they're going to automatically shut down because now they know that you're just looking at somebody to find somebody to point fingers at, to blame.
Scapegoat.
Yeah, exactly. And who wants to
Mhm.
work with somebody like that? I certainly
Seriously.
don't.
For real. It's so much easier to just get to the root of the issue and just like be like, well, it looks like you might need a little bit more help. Like, if you're struggling to get like whatever kind of quota finished or whatever it may be done, clearly there's obviously some kind of issue with time management, or maybe your workload is too heavy or something. But it's something to work
Exactly.
like look into.
Yeah, and as the leader, is it not your job to start looking at and asking the questions of like, what all are you working on? Do I have you on too much? Have I assigned too much of this to you to where you can't actually handle this workload? Like, where's the problem at? And it takes some ability to communicate, but to be honest and be like, look, I'm noticing this. And usually how I phrase it is, look, I'm noticing this. I don't think that this is the case. Like worst case scenario, I don't think that's the case at all. I think there's something else that's happening that maybe is like there's some confusion somewhere. There's something that I can do to help you. So what is it that like where's that breakdown at? How can I
Mhm.
help you be better? And how can we make sure that this doesn't happen for others in the future too? And the minute you do that, you no longer are making people on the be defensive. You're
Yep.
actually putting them into a very proactive situation to where now you're not just helping me fix your problem, you're helping me solve the problem for the future for others as well. So
Mhm.
now you're impacting the company as well, and now you're part of the team's and the company's success in the future as well. So like but yeah, the minute you blame somebody or you start to point fingers, it just makes people immediately go defensively and then, you know, some of us, like, start collecting artifacts then, you know?
Yep. Basically. And that's just not the kind of I feel like that's not the kind of sort of environment that most people wanna foster. Again, assuming positive intention here. I think most people would rather work somewhere where they're happy? Not where they're miserable.
Yeah, well, not only that, like, yes, everybody would rather work somewhere that they're happy rather than being miserable, but you can also solve like, there'll be so many times where you'll find something that was a problem, that can become a
Mm.
non-problem. And it was such a pain in the rear problem before, but now it's non-issue. Just by having a couple conversations and using, I don't know, some communication skills, some
Oh, which is a
heavy
wonderful soft skill right there.
right there. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're all extremely valuable soft skills to have. And then communication is definitely one and I don't want to gloss over. So let's move on into that portion of it. Cause I think communication is super important because in especially cybersecurity, because we constantly have to communicate up, we have to communicate to our peers, we also have to communicate down the ranks, right?
Mhm.
Like, so like it's not just like we have to communicate up, especially, in roles that I'm holding now. It's like I have to communicate to like C-suite people who have no clue about any of the technical stuff that's going to come out of my mouth. So if I use technical jargon, most of them are not going to actually understand what I'm saying. So I need to make them be able to understand it, which is very similar to having to dress it down.
Mhm.
But to communicate up, I also have to know what is relevant to the people that are the stakeholders. Like, what are their priorities? What are their business goals so that we can kind of tie our priorities to being their business goals.
Right. I think and that's like I think that's a big part of why it's so important to just like regularly have those conversations with people about what the goals are, what's needed really, because that can change, that can vary so easily from week to week, day to day.
Yeah. Whoever is commenting, I'm sorry I can't tell who you are. So if you don't mind telling me who you are, I'd appreciate it. But I can only see LinkedIn user commenting. I think it might be Mac.
I see a Mac who said, I think that was her that said with y'all in spirit.
Yeah, that's who I figured it was too. Hold on.
Oh, she's a doll.
Oh, David. It was David. Of course it was
Yeah.
David. Somebody else we know though. David G. Hey guys.
Oh,
But
David David G is actually from my area. Well, he lives over there. He lives in an area of Northern California that I grew up in. Odd, funny little story. It's a small world.
well, funny, a very funny little story. I was also originally from California in that area. So
Wait, really?
yep.
Huh, but your accent.
It's because I grew up in PA.
Mm, fair enough, fair enough.
But anyway, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, so communication skills so important because you have to be able to communicate the right knowledge up to your C-suite, but also kind of break it down into being non-technical terms because otherwise they're not going to find that useful. A lot of times pretty pictures help sell the idea without having, that's how you do it. It's pretty pictures, graphs and pictures and charts and all the metrics that you can find that look really nice and give them widgets and let them have their day and they can have the answers to their questions in like a tool of some type. That's usually what they're looking for. Whereas like, your juniors or people that are work on your team, you're breaking it down to where they're understanding the actual technical pieces of everything. But then you still have to be able to communicate to your peers as well so that, you're not just using basic terminology, you're actually able to utilize the actual technical terminology. So it's a lot of communication that you have to think about and you
Yeah.
always have to think about who you're communicating to. I think a lot of people forget, like sometimes they're like, "Oh, I'm talking to this person. I'm saying this and this." And it's like, "Okay, well, what kind of information is that person going to find relevant?"
Yeah, totally. I mean, in my real life, I think that I talk so differently compared to how I talk at work. So, like, there's already a bit of code switching involved for me. Like, so with that being said, it's like I do definitely it's the same way you'd have to talk differently to someone that's like your boss compared to someone who's maybe like, on the same level as you. So being able to switch codes, I think, is super important in cybersecurity as well, because it really does
Yeah.
depend on who you're speaking to. Yeah, and especially nowadays, now that I've been working for a minute, I will talk to people who are completely not from the industry, who are interested in the topic. That's one that I'm getting quite a bit nowadays, especially on LinkedIn. I get lots of new students or prospective students that want to know about it. And I'm like, well, how do I explain this in a way to someone that hasn't actually studied the material yet?
Yeah. Yeah, and how do I break it down in a way that will make sense to them? And, like, this is gonna lead into a future episode that we're going to be doing because I have a very, very special person to bring in for that episode, but you have to know your people.
Yeah,
Like,
know your
people
audience.
on your team, know your audience, but you have to know your people inside and out and on a personal level as well as in a professional setting. You really do, because if I hadn't taken the time to get to know people on my team on a personal level, I wouldn't know what analogies to use that they would understand, right? So I know with
Mhm.
one kid on my team, I give him soccer analogies all the time. The other kid on my team, it's football analogies. And yes, I know it's just those are sports analogies. For someone else on my team, I give them, okay, the business analogy of like, this is the same as this, and this. And like, that's kind of what we build off of. But for each person, it kind of is a little bit different about how you're going to, especially for juniors, when you're training somebody from knowing nothing to knowing everything.
Mhm.
Um, it's a little bit of like a jigsaw puzzle of figuring out what's going to work, what analogy is going to work for this topic, and
Mhm.
for them to retain it and be able to retain that kind of information at the speed that I need them to retain it.
Totally. I find, you know, I actually very recently I went to one of my best friend's baby showers, and there was an older lady there, a dear old friend of mine. She's not the most tech savvy, but she was curious about what I've been up to lately. And I'm like in my head, like, how the hell do I explain container hardening to someone who has no idea what a container is? Like, it was a bit of a challenge. Like, how do you explain that exactly? But if you can break that apart and just, explain it in a way that makes sense to someone in a digestible kind of way, I think that makes a huge difference right there.
Yeah. Yeah. People in my personal life always know how important they are to my personal life because, like, if you're not important in my personal life, I'll be like, yeah, I work in cybersecurity. And they're like, oh, so that means you're a hacker. I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? You're the one making assumptions. But the important people in my life, they actually know what I do and they know like not like exactly what I do, but they have the better idea because I talk about things with them and they're like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do a lot of policy procedure writing. I write a lot of like plans and stuff like that, like
Mhm,
business
mhm.
docs and stuff like that." And make them more technical and then they're like, "Oh, okay." So like, yeah, people in my life, my personal life, they know who they are if they're important or not. Because like depending on the answer, what do you do for a living? Oh, some people I'm just like, yeah, I work in cyber.
Basically. It's like, I mean, I could describe the job to you, but it's like, it really makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, I mean, when I worked in SOC, it would be the same thing, like, I would tell my best friend I worked in security operations, but then, like, I would tell her what I would do, and I knew she was not gonna understand what I was saying, but then
Mhm.
after a while of her, like, listening to me, she'd be like, "Oh, that's, like, the antivirus tool, right?" And I'd be like, "Girl, you know it."
I mean, yeah, and I think it's also really important to, I think, to understand that most of the people you speak to, they may not have like the educational experience or know all the correct terminology, but a lot of people in this day and age are computer literate and they understand a lot of the concepts behind it. So, and that also leads into why more people should be studying cybersecurity in the first place. It's a lot more accessible than a lot of people might think, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people hear cyber and then they immediately think that you're like I know it because I get it all the time. Like I'd go out on dates and somebody'd be like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I work in cyber." And they're like, "Oh, so you hack so don't make you mad." And I'm like, "Yes, yes. Do not cheat on me because I will find out very fast."
I
Like
mean,
I've never hacked in my life. Like I've never done it. I've never
wait, really?
like yeah, I've never I mean, I probably could do a pretty good job just first time try. I'm sure if I tried to, I could, but like, yeah, I grew up on like I came in through like the defensive side of security, so I never had the offensive side of security experience or exposure. But it doesn't mean I didn't challenge myself to think like a red teamer so that I could better secure my
Mhm.
infrastructure and stuff. So I mean, um but I've never actually like sat down with like hacking software and actually hacked. I just that's not my avenue. But like I'll let people think that all the time. Yeah, sure. Yeah, don't mess with me, man. Back to the episode topics. Okay, so soft skills. What are some other soft skills? Because we keep getting off topic. But yeah.
It happens, it happens. Another soft skill I would say that's really important is being a lifelong learner and being open to learning new things because technology is constantly changing. You know, you may have known something 5 years ago, but I mean, 5 years ago was a long time in cyber and
Well,
even
and
just in
what I
tech.
knew, what I
Sorry.
learned 5 years ago in cyber. Oh, don't apologize. We don't apologize around here. What I learned 5 years in cyber is no longer relevant today.
Right?
So, like, that's what's exciting is that, like, yeah, sure, I have the technical, the foundational technical knowledge on which everything is pretty much built, but a lot of that is outdated now because, like, I mean, I built machines when I went through college, like
Mhm.
physical computers, machines, like
Cool.
yeah, and that's no longer really even relevant in this day and age. Like I learned how to they thought that specking out hardware was going to be something that was like necessary skill to have. And let me tell you how obsolete that is nowadays. Like sometimes my dad will be looking for a new computer and he'll hit me up and be like, "Okay, I want it to be able to do all these things. So what do I need?" And that's when that skill set comes in handy is being able to help him spec out what his computer's actually going to need. But
Right.
like for the most part, like most computers nowadays are going to do everything he needs it to do at the same speed that he wants it to be done in. It's just a matter of picking the flavor that you want.
Mhm, mhm. Um, Back to like learning though. So and how quickly time progresses in cybersecurity. I have a friend who's going, my best friend, she's going through a course in cyber right now, and some of the materials were from like what was it, like 2019, and even those are just completely irrelevant at this point. I'm like, whoa, like it's crazy how fast it moves, and that's we as you know engineers and people who work in cyber, it's like we just have to be completely like malleable all the time and just take in new information because it's always changing and it's always going to keep changing.
Yeah, and doing your due diligence and doing your research and being able to research is another soft skill. Let me tell you
Hmm.
something. I have landed
Right.
whole roles having zero clue what it all entailed, but knowing that I could research anything and that I'd be
Yep.
okay with my researching skills and have landed jobs and career opportunities because of my researching skills. So that is a whole new soft skill that is opening up, but it's always relevant in cyber. And the reason she's actually getting course content from 2019, just so you know, that's still like, outdated or whatnot, is because I don't know if you know this, but most curriculums, like especially if it's like a degree path curriculum, it takes about 3 years to build the curriculum
I believe
and
that.
get it approved and pushed through. So by the time you're getting a curriculum pushed through for cyber, it's already obsolete.
That's so unfortunate. There really should be more like agile development for that kind of thing.
Trust me, I'm doing research on how to fix that. Because for industries like cyber and even like medical industries and stuff like that, like you can't really afford to have that being the case where it takes 3 years to get it to actually being approved an approved curriculum and it's already outdated by the time it's being pushed through. Like, I mean, you're just not teaching people stuff that they actually will need to know for their job. So,
Right. So, it's funny, it's just a little anecdote. So, relatively recently, when I did my CompTIA Security Plus exam, they actually asked me about war talking.
oh my gosh, yes,
Like,
yes, that's
is this 1999? Like,
war
what's going on?
driving,
Yeah, yeah,
war driving.
yeah. Like,
Yeah,
what?
we had this conversation, right? Because like, and I use blue snarfing, but war driving is another one. They're both valid terms, and this is why communication is so important in cyber. Is because when you say something like that to an executive, they're like, this person is making this all up. They have zero clue. Who uses terms like war driving and blue snarfing? Let me tell you, welcome to cybersecurity. Like,
Like, no shade to CompTIA or anything, but
but
like,
it's
what?
that. literally, like, there were times I remember I started studying for my CEH before I really even knew anything about getting into cyber or anything, so I was, like, studying for my CEH a while before that, and I went through and took, like, a practice test before I took the study, like, went through the study material and the course and stuff, just to see how I would do. And I was like, well, this definitely can't be an answer because that's not a real word. There's no way. Honeypot was another one. I was like, that's not a real word. Like, what is this? Winnie the Pooh? And then I got all the answers back and I was like, oh, so from now on, everything that I think is not a real term, that's the answer. Like,
I mean, this ties into another soft skill, which is understanding that, I don't know, this kind of goes just as a human being, but truly, we know nothing. We know nothing. We are constantly learning things that what happened yesterday may be irrelevant. It's like we have to just continue again moving forward with things,
and being adaptable. Adaptability is
right?
a good soft skill to learn on how to be adaptable. Um, there are frustrating there are ways of learning adaptability and becoming adaptable, and there are very frustrating ways of doing it. Don't necessarily always agree with how I did it and say think that that's a good course of action for anybody, but I learned it through adaptability through like military life because that's all they teach you in there in military is how to be adaptable. How to
Like
just
you are gonna
roll with
learn
the
this.
punches. Well, it was more like you're gonna learn this, but then 2 days later, oh wait, no, I want you to go learn this now. We don't need you to learn that anymore. And it was always, or like, just showing up to formation and being like, is anybody else coming to formation? Oh, that was canceled 2 hours ago. You just weren't on that thread or something. Like, stupid things like that happen all the time. And I would, as a young soldier, I used to just be like, this is so infuriating. But like now as an adult, I'm like, okay, I kind of understand what life skills that taught me.
Yeah, for real. And, things change. Again, they change all the time. And it's like, well, get over it. That's life. you know? What are you going to do? Have like a bad day because something didn't go your way? Like, you need to move forward. Again, like, that's like my whole like core kind of concept with myself. Keep it moving.
Yep. Yep. Keep moving. You roll with the punches. You kind of just take what you got to take and deal with it as it comes your way. But like you're doing the best you can, and
For real.
at the end of the day, nobody's perfect. And if you don't meet your own expectations, I guarantee you that I promise you, most people in this field have higher expectations of themselves than their bosses do of them.
Ugh, right here.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true about almost everybody who's successful in this field is we have really superbly like perfectionism ideal standards that we'd like to meet and we don't meet those, we get down on ourselves and we're like, "Oh, I'm a failure." And it's like, "Well, I mean, you kind of have like perfectionism as your standard." So
Yeah.
like
Like you're setting in a sort of standard that you couldn't possibly attain in the first place.
yeah, yeah. So like let's become more realistic with ourselves. But I think it's something that everybody in this industry pretty much deals with at some point or another. So just know that like just because you might think that, you have to meet this standard all the time and there's ebbs and flows. Things come and happen ebbs and flows. Like your personal life does affect what you are able to produce at work. Understanding that's the same with anybody who's on your team as well. Like we are all
Mhm,
human beings and I think that's really the soft skill is like remembering and being able to remind yourself that we are all human beings at the end of the day. And
mhm,
your personal life does impact your work life. So like if something if I always say like if my brain is not right in my home life, my brain's not going to work at 100% during work hours, right? Just because it's work hours doesn't mean that those other problems go away. They're still there. It's just now I have additional problems to think about.
yeah,
Um
I feel that.
so
Oh, and I
so
see my best friend commented in the chat. She's actually studying cybersecurity right now.
nice.
Yeah, she has a great brain for it. So, on that note, how might you deal with imposter syndrome? Would you like to start?
I will let you start since you're the guest and I'm the coast.
The coast, the best, the coastest with the mostest. No, so with imposter syndrome, that's something I still deal with all the time. For me, it's just kind of like sort of a necessary evil that I have to live with. But when it comes down to it, all I can all I can really do is kind of manage it really, because it's just a part of existing, I feel like. And no matter what, I was going to probably feel that way anyways. For me, it's a matter of just being kind to yourself and just letting, again, let yourself make mistakes sometimes. You know, you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to fit into some box perfectly. And, you know, I've had to deal with that a lot as, you know, a gay kid and a biracial kid. So, you know, you got to be nice to yourself sometimes, and in turn be nice to other people too.
Yeah, it never goes away, I'm sorry to tell
Right?
you. Like, it doesn't, like, I've been in my role, and I'm in a more senior role, and it still is there. I mean, you never give yourself the benefit of the doubt. That's the thing I could say about people with imposter syndrome. And not everybody, I've learned that not everybody has imposter syndrome. I've learned that there are some
What's
people out there that don't have it, but that should have it, but they don't,
those
because they don't have the
cows?
wherewithal of to know that they should have it, but they don't. Like, that's just mean. Okay, I'm being petty now. Anyway, um, fun fact though, but I will say that people that have imposter syndrome, like, here's the one thing I saw, it was a TikTok a while ago. And she said, you know, every, like, for if you're dealing with like imposter syndrome, any opportunity that is presenting itself for you is because it's meant for you to go take that next step. So you can do it scared, do it, be uneasy about it, but take that next step, because that next step wouldn't present itself unless you were ready for that next step.
That's a good
So,
way to look at it.
so as soon as I kind of reframed my thinking around that, of like, okay, yes, I have imposter syndrome. Yes, it's probably never going to go away, because I probably will always think that I don't know shit. But at the same time, at the same
Basically.
time, at the same time, I'm realistic when I'm going out for interviews, and I'm saying, here is what I do know. And I know this very, very well. Like, I mean, there have been numerous times where I've gotten into interviews and I've been like, here's what I know. And they asked me all these interview questions, and I was like, I have zero. I know this. This is what I know. Okay. This is the list of things that I know. That's not on that list.
Mhm.
But then came to realize that, like, oh no, I did know that stuff. I just didn't know that terminology that was being used to describe what that stuff was. So, like, case in point, my current job that I have, I, my technical interview was with Chris Hughes. So
Oh
let me
gosh.
just, yes.
I'd be so intimidated, not gonna lie.
Dude, he was one of the interviewers. The other one, it was very, I was like, I got off that interview and thought I bombed it. I was like, I've never had a worse technical interview in my life, because they kept bringing up NIST 853. And I was like, I don't know what NIST 850. I know NIST, but it doesn't mean I know what NIST 853 is. Like, what are they
Right?
talking about? And I was like, I wanted it to be smart. So Lloyd said it one more time, NIST 853, kept referencing it like hardcore. And I was just like, I know NIST 861. Which is incident response. So it made sense that that's what I knew. But like, yeah, I was like, then I went and looked it up afterwards and was like, oh, this is just what I always referred to as the NIST framework. That's what
Mhm,
NIST
mhm.
3 is. So, like, don't be afraid of, like, you know, even in an interview, I've thought I've bombed interviews before, and then turned around and did a little bit of research and was like, oh wait, no, I do know this stuff. Like, what am I talking about? If But I didn't know the terminology that they were using, or I didn't necessarily know. For me, it's like the special publication numbers. I didn't know the special publication numbers. Like,
Who the hell does? Like, I don't remember
I
all
do
these numbers and
now.
stuff.
I do
The
now.
the same way, like, if I had to pull up some kind of, like, I don't know, a specific sort of Python sort of code, like, or a certain kind of, like, a function, like, oh my god, I'm not gonna remember all that stuff. Or, you know, I'm
Yeah.
gonna Google everything.
Yeah, and exactly, that's the other thing, is resourcefulness helps counterbalance that, imposter syndrome, which is why research and doing thorough research is very critical. I feel it's a very critical, I'm calling it a soft skill now. Research
Y
is a soft skill.
You're not wrong. It ties into that sort of adaptability too, and that ability to figure it out for yourself, really, in problem solving, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you have to take the reins on your own sometimes, and I don't know. I feel like it's kind of fun nowadays.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it gives you that time to kind of like learn and especially in the technical side of it, you kind of get to tweak things. You're like, oh, okay, well, I saw that I did this, and I saw it do this. So now we're gonna go do this and see what that does, right? Like, especially on the technical side, you kind of just get to like tinker with things.
Mhm,
On
mhm.
not so technical side, it kind of becomes a little bit more dry. What I do when I do research, and how I kind of like have broken it down for others on my team is I always look for 3 articles that say different things or express different ideas about a topic, but they have some overlap. So like one of them's not completely off in left field, being like the sky's green when it's not, it's blue or red or purple. One might say the sky is purple at night. Cool. I can agree to that. Sometimes it is kind of purple during sunset, right? Like, but
True.
like, I'm not like finding one that's like the sky is the color of the grass ever, right? Like, so like making sure they have some similarities to them, but they express 3 different viewpoints so that you can create a better picture and a fuller picture for yourself before you move on to the next piece. Because there have been times, especially on the technical side, especially my first role in IT when I came back from being a paralegal, um, we were constantly making changes into production environments, and it was okay. It didn't There was one time that, like, I was bringing a WSUS server up, which used to be how Windows ran updates. You would have to stand up a WSUS server, and it would just, like, push updates out to all the machines that were in the office, right? Back in the ancient times. Um, and I pushed updates out, and it didn't do anything at that point. I was just like, "Okay, cool." Well, that night at 2 o'clock in the morning, all the machines on the operational dispatch floor just started rebooting. It did not give people warning because I had turned that off. But I
Oh,
didn't know
man.
that because I saw an article that told me to do this thing, and I did it, and then they started rebooting.
I mean, it
Luckily,
worked.
I had luckily, I had a good leader that was like, "I mean, you did what we asked you to do." And I was like, "Well, thank God you think that, dude, but, like, I know this is not how it should have gone down." And he was like, "Yeah, but I mean, it's working."
This
And I
is
was
true.
like "Okay, cool." But, yeah, so, again, like, as a human being, reminding yourself dealing with imposter syndrome a lot of time is just reminding yourself that you are human and that it's okay to
Right.
make mistakes. And, I mean, worst case scenario, you take everything down for like 10 minutes at most, right? Like maybe a half hour if you have to run on Windows, but like you'll learn so much more from doing stuff like that. And you will never do it again, I promise you. Um
Yeah.
the things I've done. The funniest part is that I know for a fact that there is some other leader out there listening to this just dying laughing, knowing that they have done just as much that was just as bad, and that I'm just the one that's not afraid to come out and say, "No, I've done stupid things
Haven't we
by not
all?
knowing better." But I learned so much from that experience,
I
so
bet you learn you'll never do that again, too. No.
I learned a lot more than just never doing that again.
Oh
I
gosh.
also learned not to volunteer yourself for inventory through a very similar circumstance.
Oh god, that brings back some horror stories.
Yeah.
Inventories.
Yeah. Oh, I can only imagine. But that's kind of how you deal with it, and then also I would say extending yourself grace, like Anthony said, is, just remember to extend yourself a little bit of grace and give yourself some grace that, like, you're never gonna know everything there is to know. A lot of
Mhm.
times, and a lot I started doing this as a senior for my juniors, was, when I first started running a team, which was a team ago before this team that I have now, but my last team, I had this one girl on my team, and I think I've told this story before, but, like, she would always ask why, and I was like, not really picking up that she was asking why, but what she wanted to know wasn't like, why are we doing it? She wanted to know, why are we doing it? How will I know the next time that this is the next step I need to take in the process that I was teaching her or whatnot. That's why she would always ask why. And yeah, so ask ask why a lot. Ask those
Yeah.
questions, especially as a junior, because as a junior, that's where you have that you kind of have that power to ask those questions because everybody knows you're a junior. So
Yep.
no question is a dumb question at that point. You might as well take advantage of it.
Right.
But when she first started asking why, I would let my own insecurities get to me, and I'd be like, I have to know these answers. Like, I have to know everything there is to know. Like, I better know. Like, why? Stop asking me questions that are good questions. Like, I can't tell you not to ask me a good question, but at the same time, like, I don't know this answer. Like, and I would try to hide it from her that I didn't necessarily know the answer off the top of my head, right? Like,
That is such a
and
vicious cycle.
it's so terrible. Stop doing that. Don't do that. If you're a senior and you do that, don't do that. What I started to do was I would pull up, like I'd share my screen and I would pull up Google and we would Google her question. And then I would add a little bit more context and clarity to the answer that we were finding on Google or whatnot. But it also helped her learn how to do her own research too and be resourceful. So being resourceful, doing your own research is a really great way of dealing with imposter syndrome because you at least have somebody else out there in the field backing you up if
Right.
you've done your research well enough. You might have 2 to 3 other people that are pretty expert in the field.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. As a kid, I was like total know-it-all kind of brat sort of child. So realizing eventually that I didn't have all the answers to things kind of opened up like a sort of new world where I could just be like, you know what? I actually don't know the answer to that. Let's figure it out together, even. Like, let's find
Yeah.
out right now. Because now I'm curious.
Let's look it up. But yeah,
Google.
so being able to be like and I think that's a good way to kind of bring this kind of episode to a close is being able to be authentic enough to
Ah,
know what is your insecurity as a leader to own versus what is somebody else's problem, you know, because a
mhm.
lot of times, like when, especially when I was really, really young and coming in back into a leadership role after having spent all those years being the individual contributor, I was like, well, what is it that I bring to the team anymore? Because I'm just telling people what to do. Now I'm just being the bossy lady that's like, go do this, go do this, go do this. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. Like I'm just delegating things. What do I actually bring to the team that provides benefit for me having spent all this time building up that technical side of my career? Um, so yeah, being authentic and understanding that like it took a while for me to kind of realize that, especially in that situation where I had that junior that always asked why. It took me a while and a lot of introspection and a lot of like time thinking to myself, and getting inside of my own head and overanalyzing. But
Always.
but it took me a while to realize that it was my imposter syndrome that I was kind of like pushing off onto her and you know that was my insecurity for me to deal with, so kind of owning and knowing what was mine to deal with and what wasn't. Also kind of, you know, I think it's really important as a leader, people should be able to come to you and say, hey, I don't know this, and be able to get direction or get answers or figure it out together. And if you're not going to be authentic enough, then I mean, you have to have a little bit of empathy, you have to have a little bit of authenticity. It's like a whole recipe that you need to have. You need a cup of this and a dash of that and a dash of this and a
Yeah.
lot of emotional intelligence.
For real. I'm blessed enough that my first job is with a team. I don't know if I can really talk about my contracts on this. But obviously like my team luckily has been super helpful and they allow me to ask all those questions and just, come in as a junior. And I feel like the magic of my team is that I feel like everyone remembers what it's like to be a junior, and it's been very evident in just the way that they've been so kind whenever I ask questions and be authentic about it.
I
Like
think
I don't
that's
know.
how like our company is though. I think that's like it's ingrained in our company culture, so it
Hmm.
kind of just like emanates throughout the entire team, like in the entire company.
Yeah.
Because like I I want to say that's how it is for everybody who's junior that comes into our company, right? Like I really hope that is the case. If it's not, come see me.
Well, Acquia for sure, but also like my actual contract too. Like
Yeah.
people remember what it's like to be a junior, and it's really nice. It's nice that no one ever makes me feel like dumb for not knowing something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me tell you something. The way to not be an effective leader through lack of soft skills is by making a junior ever feel stupid for asking a question they don't know the answer to.
Right?
That is like absolute leadership. I've learned from leadership skills from people that I wanted to mimic and emulate, and people that I was like, I absolutely never want to be that as a leader. And
Yep.
that is one of the ones that as a leader, I will never treat somebody that way ever, because I've been in those shoes where you know, you when when I was trying to get into to this field, you needed to have like 8 years of experience in a technical role before you could even think about coming into cyber. Like they wanted 8 to 10 years. And like sometimes they're still asking for that, but they're not asking for like 8 to 10 years of experience in this specific skill set. Like they used to like be very specific about the skill sets they wanted you to have when as an entry level cyber person.
Yeah.
Um, and so like a lot of times you were just like stuck there being like, "I don't know any of this, but we're going to fake it till we make it," kind of situation, right? Like
Oh my god, and then you just end up like the books like Amelia Bedelia, where she just doesn't know what she's doing at all.
yeah, yeah, you're just like, we're gonna guess and we're just gonna go with it and hope it's good. Like, hope it was a good guess. Like, or like research as much as I can, and then we're gonna have to make an educated decision at a certain point. And it's still that way. But like, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's like the worst skill set that you will ever that's probably not an effective way to run a junior team. So if you have a lot of juniors on your team, being that way is hurting you more than it's helping you, and it's probably causing you more headaches if you're doing that. So stop doing that. Don't be a jerk in cyber.
Yeah, be nice. And be nice
Yeah.
to yourself too.
Yep. Yeah, and remember that people are human and, like, they have human lives. They have lives outside of work. Their entire life is not gonna be work. Work, work, work. Like, is your entire life work? Mine's not. I like going on vacation. Now, do I love what I do? Yes. So do I do it a
Hell
lot more
yeah.
than I absolutely have to? Yeah, because I enjoy what I do. But at the same time, it's not all I do. I have more to my life.
For real, we are human beings.
Yeah. So, final thoughts. Let's wrap up this episode. It's been a fun episode to talk about some soft skills. What are your final thoughts, Anthony?
My final thoughts on the matter are that I think it's really easy to kind of get bogged down with the sort of technical kinds of concepts and thinking that you need to know everything about cybersecurity and all that stuff, but really you need to come in with an open mind and, be flexible, adaptable, and, like be ready to learn. Because I mean, everything that I learned in school regarding cybersecurity, most of it is pretty irrelevant compared to what I'm actually doing on the job. Most of what I'm actually doing on the job, I learned on the job.
Which is why I don't understand when people are like, "We need a bachelor's degree for you to come onto my into our team," and I'm like, "For a bachelor's degree for what? For what?
No, no, no. You need
Because
a
all that's going to be
master's,
relevant." Like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. I've seen that too, and it's like, "Oh,
entry
I
level
need a
master's.
master's." Yeah, for entry level.
Good
First
luck.
off, that person needs to understand what entry level means.
Mhm. Like, good luck filling that role.
Yeah. I mean that was kind of what I had to deal with when I was trying to get in the field, is that's the kind of like job descriptions you would see back then, and it's very stressful to see that there's been not enough of a shift to it being a realistic expectations that are set for having entry level, because who's going to
Yeah.
take, 20 bucks an hour or whatever they're offering. Going rate I think is like what, 80, like 70K to 80, like 80K is high end. I know low end is probably like 40K entry level. Yeah. I only know that because I've seen other companies give that for salaries and think they were okay. Anyway, but like, uh, so having realistic expectations, I think, is important. That's not the topic here at hand. I know we got through to that portion of what I was saying through your final takeaway. Were you done with your final takeaways?
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
basically sums it up.
Perfect. Cool. So my final takeaway is don't ever underestimate the skill set that you bring along with your soft skills, because those soft skills are what helps you navigate through your career into a leadership, and being able to communicate with your team, with stakeholders at a client, or even stakeholders within your own company. And also learning how to kind of like navigate that, like, just because you get no in one way doesn't mean, like, just because mom says no doesn't mean that you can't go to dad and ask dad the same question, right? Like, not necessarily that case, not necessarily like that, but that's really what it reminds me of sometimes, and that's really how I feel like I am. But it's because I'm really good at making, when I know something needs to happen for an organization because they're doing something insecurely or whatnot, and there's somebody that's blocking it, I'm really good at learning how to get around that block by going through somebody else, and kind of routing it out through someone else. And like, so it really is like, sometimes you have to ask mom and she says no, but dad said yes. So dad's the one I'm going to say, well, I asked dad, right? Like, sometimes you have to do that. But without having those communication skills, I wouldn't know who'd route up through as an
Mhm.
alternative when mom said no. I wouldn't have known there was a dad over here.
Mhm. And I think that ties into one last tiny little thought is like in in cybersecurity and soft skills in general, I mean, you cannot underestimate the value of your social skills like coming into play here. Like there's that is like kind of a world changer. If you can talk to people and just, relate to them, that's going to land you a job more than, some kind of certification will.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in the interviewing process, like, soft skills are so important, so important. Like, I've landed jobs off of just having soft skills, and I mean, I had technical skills. Obviously, I'm not just given jobs because I'm a woman. Like, that's I I hate when, like, I'll go interview with a company and they're like, "Oh, you're a vet." And I'm like, "Yeah, but nobody on the hiring team better freaking know. Nobody can find
Yeah.
out on the hiring team because I don't wanna get a job because I'm a vet." Like, that's not why I want the job. I want the job because I'm the right fit for the job, not
Mhm.
because I have some type of, like, some check mark I'm marking off for you. That's not why I want the job. But so, yeah, but I would agree, like, using your communication, using your soft skills, leaning on those in interviews, those can land you whole jobs, because 90% of what we do is kind of more of the soft skills, especially like, I mean, in positions like that I'm in, where it's like GRC, that's kind of like you rely more on your soft skills, and a lot of it's just like, for me personally, it's just translating it to legalese to technical terms for people. So like,
Furthermore, on that same note, it won't just land you your job, it will carry you through your whole career too.
yeah, and
It's
you'll get
important.
promotions faster because you have developed those. If you put a lot of time into developing and continually improving your soft skills, you're going to land promotions faster. You're going to rise up the ranks faster, more than likely, because you're willing to put yourself out there more often.
Mhm.
And the other bit of advice I'd give is, like, stay outside of your comfort zone. I've always told people, like, don't live in a comfort zone, don't have a comfort zone, just get comfortable living outside of your comfort zone, because that's the
Yep.
only way that you're going to really like push yourself into that next step in your career. So if you're looking to try to get into a junior leadership position, don't don't box yourself into a comfort zone.
Love
Any
it.
other final takeaways on soft skills?
Oh, I think that pretty much sums it up. I've had such a wonderful time talking to you. I feel like we need to go get a drink now.
I would agree. I've had a great time talking to you too. Appreciate you hopping on and doing this episode with me. Kind of last minute, just me, but hey, it's okay.
That's life.
Uh, we will see everyone back here in a couple of weeks with our next episode, and I will be posting more details about that later this week. So have a great time, everybody. Later.
Take care, y'all. Thank you.